Hello. Okay, this is my favorite unit, and I don't get to be there for it for a couple days, but we'll finish it. We'll do the bulk of it after spring break. Okay? I wish I could just do it all after spring break, but our calendar is we get back and we have a week maybe to finish this, a week and a half, and then we review for the AP test, and then boom, it's here, because you guys, I think, have the first AP test. All right? Okay, so social psychology. What do you think you study in social psychology, and why is it my favorite? In your head, you probably said you study the way that people think about the socialness. Okay. So here's your official definition. It studies how you think about, you influence, and you relate to one another. I think why I like it the most is it's about how you interact with other people and how do people influence you. Especially today, it's even changed even more so because of all social media. So there's 3 famous experiments here that we'll look at this week, and I think they're pretty crazy. Okay. So 9/11 why did this happen? Why did these people do it? Was it because they are crazed evil people? Or were they ordinary people corrupted by life events? So it kind of is like that nature-nurture question, right? Did society mess them up? Or were they already messed up people? So this is kind of an entryway into this kind of first week of what we'll talk about. But in general, that's what we're looking at, is how does society affect us? How do having people around affect us? Because we think we know who we are, but then all of a sudden we might act differently when there's other people around, which is true. Okay, so we'll start off with the attribution theory. So let's say, I don't get this as much at Heritage, but my old school. When a student is always aggressive and angry, what goes through a teacher's mind? I used to get some of these kids that were just mean and had a wall up day one. So what goes through my mind? Why are they acting like that? Right? Why are they acting like that? I think they are a piece of work, right? Or am I saying, I wonder what's going on at home? So the theory here, attribution, if you've heard of attributing this to this or whatever, but the attribution theory says we explain somebody's behavior by 2 things. We credit the situation they're in, or we credit the person's character or their disposition, right? So why is that student so angry? Maybe it's their life that sucks, right? And their parents are angry. Or maybe it's them. They're angry people inside. Okay? However, we make an error with this. Okay, so attribution is, hey, you can pick one or the other. But here, the fundamental attribution error says we make an error. Alright, so let's give you an example. Emily. Emily is quieter in class. Right? Quiet. Allie speaks up too much. Loud, right? So, what it ends up going through our mind is Emily is a quiet person. Allie is a loud person, right? The error that we make is we overestimate the influence of their disposition, their character. We overestimate that, and we underestimate the situation that they're in. A lot of times, if you interact with somebody, especially people that you don't know, you usually think it's them and not the situation. Did you know, Allie knows everybody. She's been here since she was a zygote, okay? But have you seen Emily at a party? She is loud, she is crazy, she's the one up on the table. So, if that's true, I am not taking into account the situation. Maybe she's not friends with very many people in this class, right? By the way, I don't just use you guys as an example, except we all do know that Allie's loud. Okay, here's another example. Ready? Somebody is tailgating you. They are all up on you. Okay? do you say, you know what, maybe she's pregnant. Maybe she's on the way to the hospital right now, right? And so you should say, hey, good luck. Have fun. Congratulations. World's best cup of coffee. Okay. Or do you say, what are you doing? And you get road rage, and then you end up flipping them off. Which one happens more often when somebody tailgates you? Probably not the first example there, right? Because, as a reminder, we overestimate and say that driver is an awful person, but we forget about the situation. Maybe their child is in trouble and they're racing home, or maybe, I don't know, whatever it is. Okay? Okay. Hold on. There we go. Alright, so kind of feeding off of this, can what you think affect how you act? Obviously, the answer is yes, right? If I know first day of school or before the summer, I would show my list of my classes to another teacher, and they're like, oh, good luck with that one. Well, then, I'm thinking that, can that affect how I act towards them? Totally, right? So, gotta think about, well, how do you change people's thoughts? Alright, so this is where persuasion comes into account. Persuasion. There are two types of persuasion here that I talk about. This should be in like a business class or an advertising class. But psychology is very involved in like marketing and advertising. Alright, peripheral, right, from the outsides. How do you persuade somebody from the outside? Well, it basically says that you influence people by, it says, incidental cues. These are things like a speaker's attractiveness. So they might use on a commercial famous people, right? Beautiful images and all kinds of external cues. But are they really persuading you for the right reasons? Okay, so then you get central route of persuasion. Sorry, LeBron should go with peripheral, right? So, oh, you should drink Sprite because I'm drinking it, and I'm crazy human freak athlete, and you will too. All right, central route, though, is saying, I want to persuade them based on the arguments and the evidence. I'm going to actually go at what I believe will convince them. And this actually is more likely to influence behavior. Okay? So you understand the two there? Peripheral. Alright, well, reverse question. We know that your attitude can affect your action. Can your action affect your attitude? The opposite way. If sometimes, let's say you don't believe in something, but you keep doing it, and then finally you start to believe it. Yeah? So maybe this would work with like the Nazis, for example. As you know with history, there are plenty of people in the Nazi Party who probably didn't believe all the crazy things that Hitler believed, right? Why might they have joined? They thought they might die, right? They were scared. Maybe they had a little bit of racism. Now, what happens if they join, they become a soldier, and they start doing these things that the soldiers do, kicking people out of ghettos and treating people terribly and just all kinds of awful stuff? Or they work at a concentration camp. Do you think over time those actions can affect their beliefs? Yeah, probably, right? And so that's leading into this experiment we're going to talk about in a second. So kind of similarly, this is interesting. The Korean War, Chinese communists had United States Army prisoners. Okay, so they're there, and they're trying to figure out kind of how to brainwash them, right? So what they do is they start by asking them to carry out small errands, and they start writing trivial statements. All right, things that don't really doesn't really matter. Okay. Then what they found out is that they were more likely later to comply to larger requests because they got them on board with small requests and small errands. So eventually they had them copy the flaws of capitalism or then start writing down what are the flaws of capitalism. And so that action, doing it over and over again, led to some of them, their beliefs started to change. And by the end of the war, 21 prisoners chose to stay with the communists. So it's almost like a little form of brainwashing here. But they didn't really know that they were getting brainwashed. Interesting, right? Okay, this is called the foot in the door phenomenon. Getting your foot in. It's the tendency to agree first to a small request, and then later you comply with a larger request. So this, y'all need to use this with your parents. Don't tell them I said that. If you want them, think of some big goal you want that you might not get. Spring break. That's next week for you guys. Okay. This summer, you want to go on a trip that you feel like they'll say no to. Start small with them, and then eventually, once you kind of get your foot in the door, they're more likely to agree to bigger things. So this is a crazy little experiment that was done. All right, they in this study they went around and asked people in the neighborhood, "Will you put a large, poorly lettered "Drive carefully" sign in your front yard?" 17% said yes. First of all, I'm like, wow, 17, that's actually kind of a lot. Okay, then they used a separate group. All right, here's their experimental group. They went around and said, "Will you put a small 3-inch be a safe driver sign?" And everybody agreed, 100%. 3 inches was like that big. So they all agreed. Then they came back 2 weeks later to those people and said, "Will you put the big ugly sign that we talked about earlier?" Well, they didn't phrase it like that. But they asked them if they'll put the other one in. And guess what? 76% agreed. 76. Earlier, what was it? 17. That is a huge, massive difference. Just by getting their foot in the door. Right? So, moral of the story for today. When you want something from your parents, your teachers, start small. Don't tell them I said that. Okay. Alright, here's the last part that goes along with all this. Alright? It's all about role playing. Okay, do you remember your first week of high school, of upper school? Did you feel weird? Like, oh, I'm here, I'm a big kid now, cool. Okay. First day of college. You're going to go into your little empty dorm room. Your parents are going to leave. Let's say you don't know your roommate. You started to decorate, and then you're like, okay, what now? It's weird, right? First day of being a teacher. I remember it. I was 23 maybe. And I taught seniors too. So I got 18-year-olds. There's only a couple years difference. And I tried to pretend like I knew what I was doing. And I was older and mature and cool. I remember first day of being married. This is actually crazy. We got back from honeymoon, and I was like we have a new apartment, we have and my mind was racing so much that I couldn't sleep and had to go sleep on the couch or something that night. But first day being a mom, I would probably cried a lot. No, but I come home with this baby, and I'm like, okay, what do I do? Right? So what happens with this is we play a role, right? We play what we think we should do, how we think we should act. And we all do that at all different times in our life, okay? So there is a study. It's called the Zimbardo Prison Experiment. And this is probably the most famous psychological experiment. All right? This is the top of your list. Zimbardo. Philip Zimbardo. You're going to get to see him in a little bit. But he is from Stanford. So it's also called the Stanford Prison Experiment. And he wanted to study role-playing. What happens when people are assigned roles? How do they start to develop into those roles? Okay? So what he did, he put an ad in the newspaper for college-age kids to come be in a prison experiment. And after they got their list of volunteers, they randomly assigned to your, half of them were in the guards, were going to be prison guards, and half of them were going to be prisoners. Okay? And if you can kind of see in some of these pictures, move that a little bit. Alright, so 1972, so the video you're going to see is not the best, but it's pretty cool that there's a video for it. It's at the school. I think it's in the bottom of the psychology building. And so they like make it look like that. The guards actually get outfits with like nightclubs. The prisoners get taking all their clothes off, and they get I don't know what you call those things. Dresses with numbers on them. Some are guards, some are prisoners. And they're told you can't inflict physical harm or physical pain, but we do want it to be like a jail. So what they didn't expect was kind of the psychological harm that they would do. Okay. So they were expecting it to run for 2 weeks. They wanted to study this, but the situation became too real. The guards got way too into their roles. The prisoners even got into their roles. We'll talk more about that later. And it was called off after 6 days. 6 days in a fake prison. So I'm going to come back to that. But so what you're going to do is you're going to watch this prison experiment and kind of see all the symbolism that they use and the different types of guards and different types of prisoners that develop. But then in the back of your mind, one thing I want you to be thinking about is, how can this experiment be generalized to the larger world? That's what we're going to look at. Alright, so I think you're going to watch it the rest of today. We're going to finish up with tomorrow. And then you're going to get me to summarize it all up afterwards. Alright, bye.